segueing a bit. So we talked a lot about science. We talked about a lot about like how it is researching with AI and like the things that worked. But you're also a business person. You're also someone who can create product and show it to people. Shash and I talked a lot about just our literal process for coding, but we're both technical first. We were, like he was a CTO back in his first startup. I'm an engineer by trade. I would be curious as to just like a high level summary, or I guess like reflection on building businesses with AI coding tools. Obviously, you've built a lot of small prototypes and you've shown people those sort of things. But I'd love to hear for someone who's not a coder first, how the process of building has been, what's felt rocky, what hasn't.
Yeah, so the short version of this is communication has improved significantly, and you said it correctly in that the speed at which things can be prototyped is much faster than it used to be. And what that enables you to do is it enables you to move much faster into the show and tell phase, and so you can go into every meeting prepped with something that the user can actually get their hands on, they can actually try, and that way the feedback that comes back to you is much more useful. It's much more robust than what it would have been if it was just an idea, right? A
Mhm.
document that was text only, or even a Figma prototype, right? It's just kind of been replaced by this idea to very quickly spin up a clickable functional demo that can be used.
Mhm. How have you, I mean, we've talked a little bit about this internally, but how have you found that I'd love for you to share the general insight of what you ended up finding, but software becoming commodity and what that means for selling.
Yeah, I think that so there's a high level discussion and there's a very kind of tangible discussion around how it has been used internally. As I said, I was not someone who would have considered myself able to write software 2 years ago. Could I do a little bit of data science? Absolutely. Was I doing some Python programming to look through and analyze data? Yes, but could I actually build a web app? Could I build a mobile app? No. Now I can. And what that means is any tool that doesn't very specifically address my needs out of the box incentivizes me to build my own. And I'm just one person. And I've seen that kind of proliferate through the organizations that I've worked with, in which the idea of build versus buy is leaning more strongly, at least in the early days, towards build than it is buy. Some of that's the unknown. Some of that's the excitement around what these AI tools have made possible. Some of the people that are just willing or kind of wanting rather to kind of own their thing, to have their kind of secret sauce imbued in a product that they develop. There's something novel and interesting about that. I think water will find its level, so to speak, in that like right now the seesaw that is very heavily build, whereas before it was very heavily buy, will kind of arc back to kind of
Mhm.
more of an equilibrium. But I do think that we are fundamentally in a different world in which a lot of SaaS apps for a long time were kind of crud database wrappers, right? Kind of no more than that. And I think we're headed for a reality in which what you have in the next state is large language models or whatever the emergent systems become wrappers. And
Mhm.
people are have some sort of horizontal product they probably pay for, but also have specific agentic workflows or things like that that they're also designing and building in-house and kind of owning. I also think, as a tangent to this, you're going to start to see it in the hiring market as well, in which companies will not only be hiring candidates in the human form, but they'll also be kind of recruiting and hiring candidates who bring their own unique agentic workflows to the
Mm.
organizations that they can then kind of proliferate across.
So looking at what SaaS has been, like we're out of the ZERP era was very, very long ago where there's just VC money flowing into every single SaaS. And again, for those who don't know, Damon also has involvement in like VC organizations. Where do you see, like again, knowing that you probably I imagine you mostly field like biotech or like you're responsible for kind of fielding biotech in your org, but where have you seen there's still clear value in software like SaaS, like vanilla SaaS? Where is it still sticking?
Yeah, so I do just to add the context. I do mostly life science and AI. So I'm positioned basically on both those pillars. So I do that kind of across the organization that I work with, like you said. And life science is life science, right? Med devices, new drugs, just those things have to work. And so that thing, that, again, other than what we've talked about in maybe AI's ability to accelerate the development of those things, the business model is still very much the same, right? You're still selling into insured or uninsured places. You're still trying to give people better, help you improve quality of lives. And
Mm.
for AI specifically, we are seeing a shakeup in the SaaS market. People are kind of beginning to look at these systems, and what has been kind of the best business model over the last couple of decades in high margin SaaS business is now under attack in a way that we haven't seen before.
Hmm.
And again, it's being replaced with this argument of build versus buy. And it's also kind of being shaken and saying this is a new platform. And similar to the transition between web and mobile, people I think are looking to the future saying, are we interacting with computers in the same way anymore? Does voice
Hmm.
become the new interface, right? Do we have agents working behind the scenes for us? And if so, what does that look like? Right? What are you actually paying
Yeah.
for? Right? Do you need that database wrapper anymore if humans aren't actually looking at the data, right? If they're just receiving the PDF reports or, the dashboards or kind of whatever, what does it actually look like? And so, I would still say that product market fit is still evaluated in the same sense it always has. But I think the operating costs for a lot of these AI companies are different in the sense that they can be lighter in headcount,
Hmm.
especially, right? People are doing more with fewer people.
Yep.
Organizations, companies are doing more with fewer people. And so like that's something that we've seen that has been consistently across the board. That does have uh, influence of both AI and, like you said, these macroeconomic factors. Borrowing money to than it was 2-3 years ago. VC as a market is suppressed significantly relative to 2-3 years ago.
What do you mean
So I think
suppressed?
there's
I'm
fewer
just not
dollars.
aware. Yeah.
There's just
I
fewer
see.
dollars
Okay.
in the entire ecosystem overall. There's fewer dollars. Some of that stems from the fact that funds are having to support valuations that peaked in 20 and 21, in which they're kind of now having to
Mm.
funnel back. The companies that raised probably when they shouldn't have, they took on more capital when they should have. They probably raised at valuations that were out over their skis,
Yeah.
metaphorically, and so we're suffering some of the ramifications of that. I think what that ultimately means is some of the companies that are funded right now are going to be some of the most profitable in terms of venture back returns in history, just because right now some of the companies, especially non AI companies, are having a really hard time raising. And so those valuations are kind of marked to market or maybe even undervalued right now, which I think is interesting.
Mm. What sort of like company? So you're fielding AI companies still. What have you seen what are the sort of products that still get deal flow, and where are the ones that have stopped getting deal flow? Like where
Yeah.
is the build versus buy distinction very
Yeah.
clear?
Yeah. So the things that get the most kind of automatic investment across the board are still vertical app companies,
Okay.
right? It's AI for healthcare. It's AI for law. It's AI for procurement. It's AI for some niche industry in which the organizations themselves aren't going to build it because they're not really knowledge workers in the traditional sense that they're not sitting at a keyboard all day long,
Hmm.
right? Or they are, and they're doing very different work. Like a lawyer probably is sitting at a keyboard most of their day, but they're not thinking about new software tools to build, or they're like reviewing legal cases. They're thinking about crafting arguments. Similarly, physicians, nurses, healthcare providers, they are interacting with patients on a daily basis. They're not thinking about like, how do I better build my AI scribe, right? But
Hmm.
at the same time, both legalese, medical jargon, et cetera, demand a little bit more of a curated product than your traditional knowledge worker in kind of, general business, white collar work, that kind of thing. And so we're still seeing a large sum of those. Yet find that we're also seeing the alternative to that, I would say, is companies in which their advantage lies on the distribution side. So the product itself might be heavily commoditized, but these people are well integrated in the network in which they're going to sell, or they have a particular sales hook that the investors are betting on will kind of sustain them through the stages of growth that will have them outlasting other companies. So not necessarily winning on product, but winning on process.
I see. So you as a VC, like with all the AI companies you've seen out in the market, she actually kind of did this fun exercise. I wish I had the link, but there was a chart for the secondary market of companies that haven't gone public yet, but you can somehow access their trades, and what are the values of those shares. I'd be curious if you just kind of took a high level pass at like what are some of the hot companies right now. So ignoring, well, we can include OpenAI, Anthropic. You can look at like Databricks. You can look at Perplexity. Just anyone kind of involved in the AI kind of SaaS space. I'd be curious who you're bullish on and who you're bearish on.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think avoiding the obvious ones, like I think there's some obvious value in Databricks. I think is actually a
Mhm.
really, probably an undervalued company in the space that they're in because they can provide some of the connective tissue that's necessary, and they're not a model provider company. I actually think that if I
Mhm.
was going to make a bear case for the OpenAI, the Anthropics of the world, it's that the cost of intelligence, so to speak, is probably
Mhm.
going close to zero. And so I don't know that you'd want to be a very specific model provider company. I think the bull case for those companies is that they're not just model providers, but they're model providers plus applications, right? They have Claude, they have ChatGPT, they have those kind of things. They have, ChatGPT, government, et cetera. So I actually think those companies aren't just model companies, but if you were specifically a model company, I think that's probably not a great place to be playing in
Mhm.
right now. I'm most bullish on SpaceX, if I'm being very honest. I mean, that company, in my estimation, is incredible. It's a better, cheaper service with a kind of hardware and executional moat that is simply unmatched. I mean, sending
Yeah.
satellites into space is just hard. So just
Mhm.
very simply, it's very hard. So like, there is no opportunity for fast follow because for as good as software companies are, the high margins, et cetera, there's always the danger of fast follow, right? Somebody
Yep.
can always kind of commoditize, if not the entire thing, a large fraction of your product and usually offer it as good enough, right? I
Mhm.
think the other thing that I would be looking at right now, and I don't have an overall lean here yet, but one of the things, I guess there are two kind of related and somewhat complementary thoughts. Number one, it feels to me like right now is the best time to build a consumer app,
Mhm.
maybe in history. Because again, you can do more with less in the sense that you can build faster, you can build better with fewer people. So you don't have to have the amount of revenue on a per user basis that has kind of traditionally been the case because you can deal with higher churn, right? Because
Yep.
you can build leaner. So I think right now is a very interesting time to be building in consumer. So if I was going to look into the private markets, I'd be saying who is really hitting a home run with consumer retention.
Mhm.
Duolingo maybe is kind of the
Yeah.
penultimate maybe the example paragon example there. I think that would be really interesting. And I think additionally to that, I think you have companies that are attacking markets that were previously too small. Think like dental, veterinary, geographically specific real estate, those kind of things that are selling services into those companies that previously wouldn't have been a large enough market for people to care about, but that may be now because of AI, right? So
Mm.
you're not just selling them an AI product in the traditional sense, but you're selling them a service in which you can almost bill them at a near human like level, right? $10,000 per year, $20,000 per year to execute against these workflows. I think both those kind of domains as a whole
Mm.
are very interesting. If people are, and if you're going to nail me down to a company or two, I think SpaceX again would get my vote as number one. That's probably a fairly obvious one. I think there are some other Databricks, very much Stripe. Again, Stripe's a
Mhm.
financial company that I think is public, but maybe falling slightly outside of the mainstream. But we use Stripe. We love Stripe. They're so good, right? I mean, they're
Yeah.
so good. It's so easy to integrate. So I mean, I think that you know even if the valuation might be not necessarily undervalued, those companies are still just so strong. It's hard not
Mhm.
to make a bull case for them.
With the biotech space, so SpaceX, you kind of alluded to, they're just doing something that's so fundamentally hard that fast follow is difficult. And biotech, obviously, there's all sorts of ways that you can approach that. There's devices, there's drugs, there's all sorts of things. But do you look at like, are there a collection of companies you look at as like SpaceX equivalents for biotech?
Not usually. And the reason
Okay.
being is primarily driven by most of the startups that achieve breakout success get bought by the largest companies very early.
Hmm.
So basically,
Like hero drug use cases or hero
yeah.
device use
Yeah.
cases?
So
I see.
basically both of those things, usually what ends up happening is as they're approaching FDA approval, if they're headed down that path, they get acquired. Phase two, a new drug comes out in phase two, Johnson& and Johnson, Eli Lilly, pick your favorite drug supplier, major company is going to buy up a lot of that IP, buy up a lot of those practices, and they're going to go ahead and finish development of that drug and then kind of enter the sphere. So like it's a more challenging market. That market's also very hard in the sense that it's very capital intensive in the same way that
Mhm.
SpaceX is, but it's highly regulated and sometimes less clear if it's going to work. Like
Mhm.
the idea of sending a satellite into space is yes, very hard, but you kind of know when it works, right? You got a
Yeah.
satellite up there. Drugs have undiscovered long tail effects that can be difficult to categorize, even in the most rigorous testing phases. Right before you get
Mhm.
it out to people, you simply don't know how it's going to be. And so there's some inherent risk and volatility involved there that actually makes speculating in the life science market harder. And to be fair, I spend more time in the med device space than I
Mhm.
do in the therapeutics because of that reason. My number one, my expertise is not necessarily in chemical therapeutics. It's much more in the biosensor diagnostic medical device world. So I spend a lot of time playing in those, and we've seen some successes. But the unstated challenge there is that usually those exit for lower multiples, and so
Mm.
there's this kind of give and take in the life sciences of you're either a drug company and you're going for the biggest payout with the highest risk, or you're a med device company who's maybe trying to get to double or a triple. instead of the home run, and looking for success that way. The thing that keeps drawing back to the life sciences overall is that, you know, similar to SpaceX, but unlike B2B SaaS, the quality of human life improves with the success.
Mhm.
So the success is not just financial. Whereas B2B SaaS, yes, there are marginal efficiency gains, but for the most part, the quality of human life
Like
is
your
unchanged.
database is not saving the
Correct.
world or something.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Like
Yeah.
Salesforce is an amplifier for productivity, but it hasn't made the world better. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? In some cases, you could make the argument that some of these companies are even making the world worse. I'm not necessarily a person that believes that, but the people have made a compelling case that, you know, Meta, for example, is net negative. I don't think anyone's going to make the case that SpaceX, at least as we understand it today, is net negative. Similarly, you know, there's some challenges in the life sciences, no doubt, but when something actually works, people's lives do better.
Cool. I think that's a wonderful place to leave it for the day. So I'll try to do my best to do a Damon outro. Thank you for listening. Like, comment, subscribe, and catch us next week for the next episode of the Founders Pod. Bye.